Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time to start this Nordic Council of Ministers event on engaging men and boys in preventing and ending violence against women and girls. I really would like to wish you welcome and congratulate you to having braved the winds outside to come here. We have a cold and windy day in New York, that's for sure. This seminar will address the Nordic countries' strategic efforts to engage men and boys in preventing and ending violence against women and girls. UN agencies, other governments and civil society have in many ways affirmed the need to do so. Addressing attitudes, behaviors and beliefs that condone such violence and working with men and boys to promote gender equality and respectful relationships appears to be essential components of prevention strategies and in shaping respectful, gender equitable attitudes and behaviors. We believe in an active involvement of men and boys in promoting a positive construction of masculinity, in gender equality and equal sharing of responsibilities in areas such as parenting, domestic work and child caring. The distinguished panelists before you will comment on the strategies for engaging men and boys in effective primary violence prevention. They will comment on ways and means of changing norms, attitudes and practices that can lower the mental threshold to men's violence against women and girls. And they will hopefully also comment on ways and means of prevention and response and the lessons learned so far. But before we hear the panelists, we have the great honor and pleasure to be able to listen to the Deputy Secretary General, Jan Eliasson, who has just arrived. And I don't think that Jan Eliasson needs much presentation. It will suffice to say that he has held in the Swedish diplomatic service all the key posts, from ambassador to Washington, state secretary, and he has also been foreign minister. And in the UN, he is a familiar and very respected face, having been ambassador to the UN, having mediated in the Iran-Iraq war in Darfur, having been the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, having been President of the General Assembly, and now, since 8 months, the Deputy Secretary General. Jan, you have the floor. We're very glad that you could come.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Morten. Dear friends, great to be with you, and great to be in an environment which reminds me of my home country, my origin. I'm very glad to meet Maria Arnholm, congratulate her as Minister representing Sweden here, and I also want to pay tribute to my Nordic friends. Nordic cooperation is really one of the best kept secrets in the world, because it's really a fantastic tool of interdependence and peacemaking. When we cross borders in the Nordic countries, it's always with positive vibrations. You know, when I was working with, let's say, Balkans or Africa, crossing a border was sometimes united with, combined with a fear of what would happen to me. But in terms of the Nordic cooperation, it's absolutely natural. And we are united not only by history and geography, we're also united by values, which is so important. So I pay tribute to my Nordic colleagues and thank them for this work, and that you also are on the barricades when it comes to human rights, and in this case the rights of women, and fighting against this scourge of violence against women. I was proud to be opening the meeting, your CSW meeting Monday, and I'm very glad to be invited to just give some introductory remarks on this subject of how we mobilize men and boys in preventing and ending violence against women and girls. And I think the big challenge is to make men and boys allies in this fight. This is the challenge, because this is actually not only a question of freedom and dignity for the women, it's also a question basically about the freedom and dignity of man. This reminds me of Prime Minister whom I worked for, Olof Palme. We were some people who wrote the speech to the meeting on its big international meeting on women in Mexico, 1975, and we had in the draft written the headline for the speech, saying that the headline was the emancipation of women. And then Olof Palme looked at us and said, "You don't understand. It's not a question of emancipation of women. It's a question of emancipation of man." I think this same subject, same approach I would take to this subject. They are, men and boys, we are natural allies and should be turned into natural allies in this very, very important struggle. I can give you some examples of what we're trying to do from the UN side. We have a trust fund to eliminate violence against women. We have provided $6 million in grants on this. In the peacekeeping department, we have starting, this is standard part of the training of all blue helmets. All peacekeepers have a powerful anti-violence video played out, and to teach the troops how to prevent and respond to violence against women in conflict situations. Thirdly, UN Women has created a so-called global virtual knowledge center to end violence against women and girls. This is a multilingual online resource with a wealth of tools, including many to reach men and boys. UN Women is also getting pledges from governments, participating in its new global initiative called Commit. And so far, some 40 countries have joined. I call on all others to commit to new concrete national actions to end violence against women. We have also joined a program called Partners for Prevention. It brings together UNDP, UNFPA, UNFPA, UN Women, and UN volunteers in a joint program for Asia and Pacific. And the aim is to reach men and boys to prevent violence. And UN Women is also strengthening partnerships with pro-equality men's groups. So, and the Secretary General has also made this a signature issue by leading up his Unite to End Violence Against Women campaign. And I participate personally in a demonstration in the lobby of the UN on the 14th of February on Valentine's Day to support the 1 billion movement to end violence against women. Examples all over the world that come back, we get feedback that this is now also noted in the field. Our military advisors send back reports, and the UN Trust Fund backed Men's Forum in Lebanon. I was there in December, and I was told about a village that was completely transformed after this program. No one had talked about violence against women there ever, but now it's normal for people to speak out. And one participant who was interviewed acknowledged that it will not be easy to change centuries of stereotypes, but he said the first step is to make violent masculinity a shame in our society. I like that quote, make violent masculinity a shame in our society. And that brings me back to the beginning of my presentation, that we really have to make men and boys allies, and to fight this violent masculinity and see, in fact, what in fact makes us human beings, makes us really understand the dignity of life and understand how we create a better world by working side by side on this extremely important issue, which has this year received tremendously good new momentum. And I thank everyone in this room. The fact that this room is overcrowded is a sign of the hearts that are into this. We have given it some extra sense. This is not bureaucratic exercises. This is the real thing. And I sense that more and more in around the world where I go, and I sense it at this Commission of Status of Women meeting. My final quote is my own. It's when you want to change things, it's actually not the hands you shake in diplomacy. Things change when you touch hearts. It's not the hands you shake, it's the hearts you touch. And I think we are doing that, and you are doing that. For that, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan Eliasson, for those inspiring words and for your appeal. And thank you also for taking us through some of the concrete UN action in the field of trying to end violence against women. We will now start the presentations by the panelists, and by virtue of the fact that Sweden is this year in the chair of the Nordic Council of Ministers, I will give the floor first to my own minister, Maria Arnholm. The alternative would have been to given it to the Norwegian minister in recognition of the triumphs in cross-country skiing at the World Championships, but the chairmanship of the Nordic Council has preference. So Ms. Maria Arnholm, I should say that she is also the newest member of the Swedish cabinet, appointed recently, stepping up from the position number 2 in the ministry to become minister. And she has a background in law and has spent her career mostly in the political sphere, but also in the sphere of management and communications consulting. Yours is the floor, Minister.
Dear friends, actually I spent most of my working life in corporate Sweden, and that's why it's such a big grace for me to come back to the common sector and to as a 6-week-old in my new position, have the great opportunity and honor to start this seminar. Thank you very much for coming here. It's always a pleasure to discuss these important issues together with other Nordic friends and colleagues. As Deputy Secretary General Eliasson pointed out, we share a common history, common values, and a common approach to how we choose to organize our societies. And we share a determination to work for gender equality. When combating men's and boys' violence against women and girls, the preventive work must focus both on general measures as well as actions targeting the perpetrators. Let me start by raising very briefly 3 more general measures I considered essential in the preventive work. Firstly, general measures aiming at increasing the overall gender equality that involve both women and men. Sweden's experience is that policies aimed at increasing gender equality also must focus on men rather than exclusively target women. In this respect, our Nordic societies have changed substantially in the last couple of decades. One very important element within the general measures is to engage more fathers to take parental leave. The correlation between fathers taking care of children and preventing violence against women might not seem so evident. However, we have seen that measures that increases men's engagements with their children and increase their share of domestic and household work also have positive effects in reducing violence in close relationships. And here I really am among friends, because in all the Nordic countries we are taking further steps reforming the parental leave system. Secondly, Secondly, the preventive strategies must also focus on children, and there I want to use another example that is common to us all: the prohibition of corporal punishment. It has been explicitly prohibited in Sweden for more than 30 years, and I know in the other countries as well. And even if it still exists, the legislation has contributed to significant normative change, and that's a very good result. And thirdly, among the more general measures, I want to mention action as targeting young people. That they are really fundamental to change discriminatory social norms and gender stereotypes. Like violent masculinity should really be a shame. Men's and boys' violence against women and girls is often rooted in stereotypic perceptions of what constitutes male and female behavior and what attitudes men and boys ought to have towards women. It is therefore imperative to question traditional masculinity roles that link men and masculinity to power, competition, and domination instead of to care and equality, and also to actively promote non-violent masculinities. This is easily said, but not very easily done, and I really look forward to get some input on that third measure, because I think it's maybe one of the most important steps to take, but also one of the more difficult. Let me also turn to some measures targeting perpetrators. We just mentioned some examples. Many aggressors, even when found guilty in trial, fail to acknowledge that they are part of the problem and therefore also part of the solution. The Swedish Prison and Probation Service has developed programs for perpetrators of violence against women. One example of such a program is that men convicted of violence in a close relationship are offered a 6-month retreatment program. We have seen positive results of that, even if evaluations of such programs are difficult. Another example of concrete measures targeting men who use violence is the Swedish legislation that criminalizes repeated violence of women in close relationships. Perpetrators of repeated violence can be tried and sentenced for a repeated chain of actions instead of only the most severe violation. This legislation has recently been evaluated, and we can see that the law has shown intended results. Closing up, I would like to make a reflection. Men sometimes perceive gender equality as an issue that does not affect or concern them. Not all men, but too many. Some even feel that they have much to lose in a gender equal society. But that's not the case. Gender equality is a win-win affair. That is why it is so important to engage more men and boys in the work for gender equality. Men in all walks of life can help to prevent violence by challenging traditional gender stereotypes, by saying no to sexism, by questioning and reporting violence, and by being positive role models. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Arnholm. Next on my list is Minister Arhinmäki of Finland, Minister of Culture and Sport since 2011, and also leader of his party, the Left Alliance, since 2009. That's one of the parties in the Finnish government coalition. You have the floor, Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it's very honored to be in this event, and it's really fine to see all our ministers here. And unfortunately, the air is not so good in the room, but it's just because it's overcrowded, and that's probably a good thing. If we think the issue, the violence against women and girls is a human rights violation, that we have to see first and totally. Affecting women and girls all over the world. The promotion of human rights is a central part of Finnish government's foreign and security policy, and as well it's all the Nordic countries. We have placed the human rights of women as one of our priorities, as one of the most crucial aspects of violence against women and girls. Finland promotes sexual and reproductive health and rights of women and girls, both in bilateral and multilateral fora. Preventing actions and engaging men and boys is particularly important when working with issues relating to sexual and reproductive health and rights. To prevent violence against women and girls, we need to engage men and boys. And that's very good to see that we have 2 gender equality ministers who are men, and that's showing as well that it's not just women issue, it's the issue of all human beings. Violence against women and girls is linked to masculine culture and its gender stereotypes and attitudes towards women. According to one of these stereotypes, violence is strongly presented in male culture, male groups, and activities. We need to make this model and its linkage visible and find measures to eliminate violence, promoting positive and non-violence image for men. That's pretty big work to do global, but as well in Nordic countries. I remember for example, my time in school. Every single pause we have some fighting on the like schoolyard. It was more like fun and more like play, but we had this model that it's okay that boys are fighting, wrestling, and it's part of being a man. We have to struggle against this kind of ideas. One way of working with the non-violence male culture in Finland has been the Boys' House. The Boys' House is established offering low threshold support services of boys aged 10 to 28. The Boys' House offers both individual and group support and networking. It strives to provide new perspectives towards masculinity and the roles of men and boys. The Boys' House is sending a message that boys have the right to break harmful stereotypes and expand the way to be a man and boy in a non-violent manner. In Finland, we have identified 4 of good practices from researches and statistics. First, making the prevention of gender-based violence matter to men. Second, moving from awareness to action. Third, making an impact on the police and military. And fourth, changing institutional responses. In Finland, violent offenders seek admission to perpetrator programs on the advice by the authorities, service providers, spouse or partner, or their own. Collaboration between the police, women's services, court of law, and other services is the area contributes significantly to the outcome of violence rehabilitation programs. In the Finnish city of Espoo, for example, the so-called Alternative to Violence program works closely with police in order to share contact information of men involving in reported incidents of intimate partner violence. Due to cultural differences and language barriers, immigrant men may benefit from their own violence rehabilitation programs. The Alternative to Violence program in Espoo has a separate component that specializes in the prevention and eradication of violence among immigrant men. The services aim to help immigrant men who have used violence or who are concerned that they may turn to violence in their families or intimate partner relationships. The main focus of the service is on prevention and on the integration of immigrant men in the Finnish society, which is supported through meetings where staff members talk with men about the Finnish society, the roles of men and women, legislation and equality. We need to engage all parties in order to prevent and eliminate violence against women. Promoting positive attitudes and behavior, providing information and raising awareness of all individuals, women, men, girls and boys, that is key. Preventing and eliminating violence against women and girls is an ongoing process and much remains to be done. I hope that these 2 weeks will give us new tools and renewed commitment to continue this extremely important work. Thank you for having this possibility to have this speech. Unfortunately, I had to leave to another event, but Helena Edvalls, our expert of these issues, coming instead for me, and she can answer all questions according our programs. our work, what we are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Arinmäki. Next speaker on my list is the Minister of Children, Equality and Social Inclusion of Norway, Ms. Inga Marte Thorkildsen. She has been an MP since 2001, representing the Socialist Left Party in Parliament. You have the floor, Minister.
Thank you very much. I also want to start by saying that I appreciate being here, and thank you very much for not excluding me, even though we beat you time after time in cross-country skiing. You beat us a couple of days ago. Yeah, you did. Okay, I would like to say that I agree with Maria Arnholm, my colleague from Sweden, when it comes to the fact that we have achieved a lot in the Nordic countries, and that we, in many ways, are very lucky to be where we are, and we should pay tribute to our predecessors, who have also fought many fights before us. And I know they have sacrificed a lot, but they achieved even more, I would say. And I say this because this is a special year for us in Norway. It's our 100th anniversary for women's right to vote. So the 8th of March will be very special this year. And it's important to pay tribute to the pioneers of Norway. And also think about who are the pioneers today, who are actually moving history forward today, or her story. But I would also say that I think that we have another thing in common here, and that is more challenging, because in our countries, the notion that we are actually gender equal is very common, and it makes it hard to move forward, because we know that we have many challenges still. We have to fight for the rights that have been achieved sometimes. For instance, parental leave in Norway. Well, sounds very strange to a lot of people, I know that, but this is something we have in common, that we have earmarked some of the parental leave for men only, or for the fathers. In Norway, for instance, it is 14 weeks from the 1st of July this year, 14 weeks for the father, 14 weeks for the mother, and then altogether we have 49 or 59 weeks. So they have quite an amount of weeks that they can share between them. And it's based on his income, not on her income, which it was before. And that is important to change gender roles and to make men more empathic and natural caregivers. But this is a fight we have to take every day. And we see that the conservative parties, for instance, in Norway, they don't want this. And they see this as a backlash when it comes to family policy, because they're talking about families instead of talking about gender equality. But we know that it's very important to have gender equality within the families, also when it comes to preventing violence, because we see that this is two sides of the same coin. So changing the role models of men is very important by different kinds of means, but making them natural caregivers is very important. But I think that starting with the younger generations is key to change. And of course, if they don't see themselves as having a problem with this, if they just see violence against women as something that concerns someone else, somebody called it the othering, that you make this a problem of other people, especially immigrants. We see that in Norway. Then it's hard to make them, to mobilize them in this struggle. And we've seen that when we tried to arrange, for instance, campaigns in Norway, when we wanted to have football supporters, as you did in Denmark. They said, wow, this is not our problem. We're not violent. We don't want to be part of this. And of course, we know that women have always seen themselves as gender. Men haven't. They are individuals. And that is really problematic. So we have to change the attitudes when it comes to this, and of course we have to stop seeing this problem as a private matter. It is something that we have in common. It has to do with the whole organization of the society. It is structural, and of course it has to do with gender. So we need to make this a common issue on the political table of the men in power and ordinary men. But I would like to start with the men in power, because we know that if we are going to change the structures, and if we are going to allocate enough resources, if we're not going to pay enough attention to this problem and removing taboos so that we can create a culture of shame, as Mr. Eliasson said the other day, it was beautiful, that puts the shame on the perpetrators and not on the victims, then we need the forces and the power of these men who hold positions. And it's usually men who do. So that's really important. And I think it will be quite difficult for me when I'm coming back to Norway and I'm telling about this. And of course, I've been twittering a lot from here, and I see that a lot of followers, they think it's great, and a lot of them think that, oh wow, this is a problem for other people. This is not, oh, I'm so glad we live in a gender equal society, they say. And they don't see this as a problem for our societies, but we know that we have huge problems. And very big dark numbers because of the culture of shame, for instance, and because we haven't allocated enough resources to tackle the problem. They don't move forward. They don't seek. They don't go to the police. They don't go to tell the health service providers what they have been exposed to. And they have to talk about this in a specific manner, not on in general terms. And I think I'm also, as you said, a minister of children. And I think that children may be a way into the grown-up men in our society. Because, as someone said from South Africa the other day, I don't want my daughter to experience sexual abuse. And he was mobilized because of that. Because he saw that he had to change the structures, he had to change the role models to prevent this effectively. And those who are fathers of sons, they don't want this to happen to their sons, that they're going to be perpetrators. They don't want that. And I don't want my son to be that. And I know my husband doesn't want our son to become a perpetrator. And I think that can mobilize resources if we do this, if we reach out in a good manner. We have to talk about that, how to actually deal with this in so-called gender equal societies where men don't feel that they're a part of this problem. How can we reach them, really reach them? We've also seen that a lot of these men are actually also victims. For instance, when it comes to honor killings, or when it comes to forced marriage, a lot of the boys are forced to use violence against their sisters, for instance, and they don't want to do that, but they have to. There's a lot of pressure on these young boys, and we have to address or reach out to them too. They don't want this. And we also have some training that reaches out to the minority groups in Norway, but also to others, but those who have problems with using violence in the upbringing of the child. And that's especially a problem for minority groups, where they have been used to using violence in their own countries. And this is not the case in Norway anymore. It used to be up until the 80s. And now Norwegian parents, they don't use it as a means of the upbringing, but they use a lot of violence still. And they get to learn other tools, other mechanisms of bringing up a child. ICDP, it's International Child Development Program, so it's an international program. And they have father groups, for instance, which are very, very successful. So they talk directly and straightforward with the fathers, which is very important. Yeah, and I would like to finish off with saying that we also know that a lot of the men who engage in this, and I'm so glad they do, they also pay a price. I heard yesterday about the guy who had been actively promoting the change of gender roles, and he had been very active in these fights. And he had problems when he went out to politics. He had problems with actually getting a leading position in the private sector because they saw him not as a proper man. I think he was a threat. So we should pay tribute to those two and take good care of those guys. And we can take good care of we women, can't we? That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Torkelsen. Next on the list is Mr. Manu Sareen, the Minister for Gender Equality and Ecclesiastical Affairs of Denmark, and he's an MP since 2008. He's also a well-known author of children's books, I've understood. Yeah, but that's maybe another matter.
That won't be today. Thank you very much. Is it on? Yes, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure being here with my Nordic colleagues, and we don't compete with Sweden or Norway in Denmark. Actually, we don't ski at all. When we ski, we go to Norway, so we are really bad at that. And it's actually very nice listening to you, because we're doing the same thing in all the Nordic countries, more or less. And we're also facing the same problems, as you said, Inga, like when we read the social medias, a lot of anger is also there when we talk about gender equality, but that's another subject. The last couple of days we have been talking a lot about violence. Violence is harmful, violence is fatal. We have been talking about physical violence, psychological violence. As you also said, violence where children they are witnessing the violence, and we have been talking about how limited it is for women, for whole societies, from everybody, and we have also been talking about that we don't tolerate any kind of violence, be it a patriarchal system or a part of a culture. We don't tolerate at all, and actually before I was a politician and also an author for the children's book. I was a social worker, and I'm not that old, but 20 years ago when I started, I remember we had the first cases where I worked, and when we experienced this kind of cases, the perpetrators, they told us that this is a private matter. This is our culture. You can't interfere. And luckily, we have gone from that, and we are taking new steps. And one of the steps is actually what we are talking about right now: engaging men and boys, and not in the sense of violence against women, but men's violence against women, because that's what we are talking about. And yesterday we had a side event, a Danish side event, where Michael Kaufman was there. He started the White Ribbon. And he told us that the biggest success in the history of the world was the women's movement. And actually, I totally agree with him. But the time is now that we, as I said just before, that we engage men and women, boys, because we have done and we are having a lot of success in the Nordic countries, like you are saying. In Denmark also we have seen a great decline in the amount of female victims of violence, and that's, I think, a very, very big success. And we have done the same thing as you've been talking about. We have programs for social workers, law enforcement, and so on. But I think the biggest step has been that we actually have been able, the last couple of years, to change the attitude when we are talking about men's violence against women, because we have been able to break down the taboo. This is not any private matter anymore. This is a matter for everybody, for women and for men, for boys and for the girls. So I think that has actually been the biggest success. And the next step for me, I think, but we could discuss that afterwards, the next step actually is how do we really engage boys and men? Because they are part of the solutions, no doubt about that. And I think all of us agree about that. As Inge also told you just told it very shortly. In Denmark, last year we had this campaign giving violence the red card, where sports stars and handball players and soccer players, they go out and saying out loudly, we don't accept violence against women. And in Denmark, they're not afraid, because it's you could change it. You could change the attitude and saying it's masculine to say no to violence against women, and to do the opposite thing is not acceptable at all. And Friday we will start all over again the White Ribbon campaign, engaging men to say no to violence against women also. But I think it's also very important that we engage the youngsters in the school, both small girls and also boys, because this is also about a part of a culture. We need to change the culture that accept that it's okay beating up a woman. So we are also having campaigns in schools where we engage boys and girls and telling them about date violence and so on. So they have a knowledge and most important an awareness about this. So men's violence against women for me and the Danish government, and I think that you will agree, my colleagues from the Nordic countries, it's about power, but it's about men using their power, but they can only use their power if we give them, if we allow them to use their power. If we don't allow them to use that power, I don't think that they'll do it, and I think that the attitude will change slowly. So actually we owe that to women of the world, and we owe, awfully, of course, owe that for ourselves. And we have started in the Nordic country, and I'm very, very proud that we have reached so far, but still we have a lot of work to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Sareen. Next one to speak is the director of the Icelandic Center for Gender Equality, Ms. Kristín Asgeirsdóttir. The center is an agency under the Ministry for Welfare, and Ms. Asgeirsdóttir has previously been a researcher on gender at the University of Iceland, and she has also worked in the field with UNIFEM in Kosovo. And she's an MP, or she was an MP for the Women's Alliance during the 90s. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you. Well, before I begin my speech, I want to tell you that yesterday I met an old Icelander here in the UN buildings. He will become 80 years old next year. He's lived most of his life in the United States. Worked in the bank, the finance system, and he said to me, the greatest change that I have seen in my life is the role of women, or in the role or the situation of women. And I think it's important to have this in mind, that although we are discussing this horrible issue of violence, of men's violence against women, we have really seen a lot of changes in the last few decades. And we are taking important steps. And the next one is the elimination of violence against women. So what I wanted to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that the notion of gender mainstreaming remains central to the administration of gender equality policies in Iceland. However, a vital part of raising the issue of gender involves an effort on the part of government to increase the level of activity in gender equality issues, working on specific programs and initiatives. This includes working on various preventive measures against gender-based violence in collaboration between government authorities and organizations specifically involved in such preventive measures. It has long been clear that gender equality, the promotion and protection of women's rights, and working on preventive measures against gender-based violence requires a political strategy that mobilizes men in changing gender relations. Therefore, a distinctive focus set on greater involvement of men in gender equality work will remain a method to reach the aim of gender equality. Already in 1991, grounded on the idea of a dual earner and dual care model, the Minister for Social Affairs at that time, Jóhanna Sigurðardóttir, who is now our Prime Minister, established a working group mandated to put forward suggestions on how to consolidate the need for men's increased participation in family life. Subsequently, in 1994, Mrs. Sigurðardóttir established a new advisory committee, later to be given the name the Men's Committee. The committee had the specific role to put forward suggestions on how to increase men's participation in achieving greater gender equality. The committee had considerable freedom in addressing the issues, and it's therefore worthy of attention that their primary focus would become gender-based violence and the need to find ways to prevent men's violence against women. In their work, emphasis was put on establishing a treatment alternative for violent offenders, men that willingly sought help to end violent behavior towards their spouses. This treatment alternative, funded by the government, has been providing counseling to men since 1998. It is designed in close cooperation with the Norwegian colleagues, with the Norwegian program named Alternative to Violence. The guidance from the Norwegian colleagues has proven invaluable for the psychologists leading the program in Iceland. There is also a special program for young perpetrators, and I'm sad to say that the youngest boy was 13 years old. This is for boys in the age between 13 and 18. And there is also a program for prisoners. The engagement of men in gender equality issues in Iceland has been a recurring theme in the last few decades. Groups of Icelandic men have organized themselves primarily around parenthood and violence against women. The engagement of men in gender equality has included supporting women's initiatives, officially established men's groups, and through various campaigns that engage men in combating gender-based violence. The men's group of the Feminist Association of Iceland has frequently organized special anti-rape campaigns called No campaigns, where men are urged to assume greater responsibility. And only last summer, 100 men wrote a letter to an Icelandic mayor encouraging him to take the issue of sexual violence more seriously during one of Iceland's biggest town festivals. As a part of current action plan for gender equality in Iceland, the Ministry of Welfare operates a working group tasked with the objective of creating proposals on how to increase men's participation in gender equality issues. This is a new men's group. The group has looked into a number of issues, among them the issue of men's violence against women. Special attention has been put on the role of societal factors contributing to violence, focusing on the interplay between norms and values in society. The working group states that in order to discuss the issues, policies must take into consideration the relationship between the construction of masculine identities and violence. This does not only involve men's violence against women, but also statistics portraying men as an overwhelming majority of perpetrators of other types of offenses. The group claims that it is essential to address the ideas associating masculine behavior with violent and criminal behavior. If we apply the most basic statistical methods and look at the difference between incarceration rates of men and women for the last 5 years in Iceland, looking specifically into sexual crimes, violent crimes and murders, numbers portray a gender dimension where men are 97.6% of those incarcerated. 97.6%. These statistics manifest the issue of gender, more specifically the relationship between gender and violence, and brings to the forefront the urgent need to involve men in finding solutions to the societal problem of gender-based violence. We must change the dominating and often destructive ideas about masculine behavior. We must also look into the horrible world of violent pornography and its effect on young people, not least boys. That is a taboo that we must discuss. The solutions must be found through a meaningful dialogue between women and men, girls and boys, and it has to start now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Asgeirsson. Asgeirsdottir, sorry. I've trying to extract a few. There were many threads in what has been said. I was trying to extract a few in one area only, namely in regard to prevention, and I extracted four threads. First, the importance of getting men and boys to partner with women and girls in campaigns and in awareness-raising efforts and in gender work generally. Second, I think it was mentioned by the Norwegian minister, the importance of engaging men in power in addressing violence against women and girls. And third, was mentioned by all of you, promoting non-violent images, role models of men, and developing healthy attitudes early in life in kindergarten, in school, or in sports. I think sports was particularly mentioned by the Finnish minister. And fourth was mentioned by the Swedish minister, reducing violence that boys witness or are subjected to, not least subjected to. The Icelandic director brought up directly the issue of media also, and that would be a question I would like to, using my prerogative as moderator, would like to throw to the ministers and the panelists. To what extent or when will we have a partnership with the modern media in order to get away from the current stereotypes and producing non-violent images. But that is only one question. I will open the floor for additional comments and questions, but first I would like to recognize the Minister of Gender Equality of the Netherlands, Jette Boesemaker, who has asked to be the first commentator. You have the floor, Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you also. Thank you for organizing, I think, this very important side event on engaging men and boys in preventing and ending violence against women and girls. I think it's a really very good side event to focus on the role of men and boys. And like the panelists, I'm strongly convinced that men and boys play a crucial role in combating violence against women and girls. And I distinguished three roles in your presentations, which are also important in the Netherlands. I think the first is focusing on the role of men as fathers, like the Swedish minister emphasized. Because I think if fathers develop a close relationship with their children, they are much more aware of dangers of violence done by boys or men towards women and girls. I also recognize the role of men as perpetrators. And in the Netherlands, like in many Nordic countries, we don't want to ignore the perpetrators anymore, but we want to help them to change their attitudes. And the third role I distinguished is about the role of boys and men as change makers. And I think that's a very important role, and I would like to elaborate on this point. Gender awareness and attitudes develop at a young age. As school children practice and apply their attitudes and values towards other children, especially children of the other sex.
And I think, therefore, schools are an important breeding ground for the development of gender-friendly attitudes. We can only find violence against women if there are men who stand up and say, together with women, no to violence. So I think we really need them from a community-based perspective to change society. And in the Netherlands, we offer children, boys and girls together nowadays, knowledge about gender identities and sexual diversity in educational programs in primary and secondary education. Our programs aim at increasing sexual health, empowerment, prevention of sexual violence, and respect for homosexuality and gender identity. And our yearly monitoring of well-being and safety of children at school, unfortunately, and I have to say that, makes clear that children's feeling of safety is decreasing in recent years. Especially LGBT children do not feel safe. And I would emphasize that because I think violence against women and girls is related to violence against LGBT. The government actually develops an action plan towards bullying at school, with special attention for respect towards and safety of the LGBT children. A lesbian, homosexual, transgender. So, and in addition, the Dutch government supports a social media campaign aimed at youngsters on sexual health called Make Sex Clear. Finally, I would like to highlight as well a special initiative of the Dutch government, and that is the We Can Young campaign, in which boys and girls act as change makers and approach their peers. And it started from the worldwide We Can campaign, started in 2004, and it's now a worldwide concept to say no to violence. And it really starts from peer groups. So it starts from 3 points. It starts from the interest of peer education. Secondly, it are young people who devise activities and implement them together with leaders of local youth networks, boys and girls. And thirdly, young people take their activities out into the community, helping to create change. And I want to emphasize that I think that we really need this new generation and their new the way they work with, for example, social media. And they are much better in it than I think my and our generation in using the media as a tool to fight violence. And from that perspective, I think the We Can campaign is not a state campaign, but is a campaign made by young leaders to say no and to create a new future without violence against women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Now time for comments and questions from the floor. I think you will have to give me a clear hands up in order for me to be able to see you. Anyone who would like to go first? Yes, a lady down there.
Hello, my name's Fiona Basil and I'm a photojournalist from Australia. I thank you all for your presentations today. You've all touched upon wanting to prevent violence against women by men, and I'm just wanting to ask about, in this digital culture where young people particularly are spending a lot more time behind screens and on the internet, what is being done about pornography and the access to pornography? Because it's quite a big problem. And I know in Australia we're doing research and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And particularly for young boys, where they're being groomed, or there are sites where you go onto games and in a couple of clicks you go onto pornography sites. So I'm just wondering what can be done about this, because it's integral to educating young boys and men. It's part of the problem, I think.
Anybody else at this stage? Or shall we let the ministers and the panelists take a stab at this issue. Media.
Well, thank you for first Minister from the Netherlands. It was a very good, sharp comment you made. And I totally agree with you on everything you said. Also that violence against women and girls also has an effect on, or is a side of the coin when it comes to the violence against LGBT, which is lesbian, gays and bi and yeah, transgender. Yeah. So this is because it has to do with accepting sexual identity, sexual norms, sexual roles, or gender roles, and that they can vary. They don't have to be like one standard. And we also see a lot of violence against these people in Norway, people with a different sexual orientation than the majority. When it comes to the media, you mentioned it, and Fiona Bassel mentioned it when it comes to pornography. I think it's difficult to know the answer, but we're going to make young people in Norway, we're going to integrate them into making a campaign against rape in Norway. It's a part of an action plan, and the youngsters are going to be part of this plan. And I'm very curious about how they will take their chance to form this campaign. What will be their focus? Because I think we have to involve them and ask them what they feel is the problem. And I think that the internet and the media will be a crucial point. And also we should make those who own the medias and the journalists and the editors more responsible for what's happening in the media. And also the gender issue is crucial there, because most of those who own the medias, most of those who earn from the medias, and most of those who work as journalists, and most also of the sources that they use to interview, when they interview people, are men. So it's a man's world. So we have to address this as a gendered arena. And well, I would like to go back to Norway and see how can we approach this, but to do it while bringing the young people themselves into this debate, so that this isn't only a grown-up debate, it's from the young ones themselves.
Thank you, Minister Torkelsen. Next is Minister Sareen, I think.
Thank you. This is something about Fiona Bassel. You mentioned that, and also Kristin, about sexual violence and pornography. Actually, our side event yesterday was also about sexual violence and the portrayals of women in the media. And I don't have any solutions, but one thing I said yesterday was, and I was quite shocked about that, and that actually just shows that you have a point, and also you, Kristin, that in Denmark, 97% of all boys between 12 and 14 years old have watched pornography, and 15% have started watching it when they were 9 years old. So actually we are facing I think a big challenge right now. The problem is we can't just shut it down, because this is cross-border also. And this is not, like I said yesterday, this is not and should not be not right now be a discussion about banning porn or not. But this is about how do we protect our boys, because I think this is a matter of protection also, because I really agree with Kristin, because when they see that you can treat girls and women like that, of course, in my universe, I think that they'll take it with them in their relationships. And we also saw in Denmark that some girls, when you are talking about date violence, and yeah, they think that it's okay. They don't know their limits. They think it's okay that if their boyfriends just slap them once or twice. And for me, it's again that the limits are moving. This is a new kind of problem, and we discussed it last year also. And in the meantime, I've got 2 boys, 1 girl. I asked my eldest son, he's 13 now. Last year I asked him that if he had watched pornography. He said no. But when I checked the computer, it wasn't, in fact, the truth. But of course he would say no. I also said no when I was a kid. But so this is, I think that numbers 97% is really a high number, and we have to keep on bringing this subject next year and next year again, because right now I don't think we have any solutions beside parents helping their kids and schools engaging teachers and keep on talking about these kind of violence in pornography, and also clubs and so on, and teachers and pedagogues. So I think that's the solution right now.
Thank you very much, Minister. Ms. Askerisdottir.
Well, there has been a huge debate in Iceland about pornography and the effect of pornography, and the Minister of Interior has suggested that some kind of restrictions or a ban on pornography should be tried, and I can tell you that this is like entering a minefield. You know, there is so much opposition and outrage, because you know, and talk about that this is an attack on the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and so on. But actually, I think that most people, they have no idea about the content of the pornographic world. And I think that when I'm talking about this, that we need to stop this somehow. That people think that we want to, you know, have a ban on Playboy or Hustler or, you know, something like that. But you know, this world is horrific, and we had a visit in Iceland from a specialist called an American specialist called Gail Dines, and her lecture was broadcasted on the internet. See what the techniques can do. And you know, it was really horrifying. And among other things, she was showing us the so-called stepdaughters pages, where men are encouraged to abuse their stepdaughters. You know, the stepdaughters, they are just waiting for their stepfather, and so on. This is really horrifying. And the so-called gonzo porno, where 2-3 men are torturing women. So this is what it is about, and I'm sure that there are some ways, you know, like some kind of barriers. We need the telephone companies need to come into this. You know, there must be possible somehow to close at least some of these sites. But I know it's difficult. I know it's very difficult.
The thing that you're talking about. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Ms. Evalds from Finland has asked for the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. This is a very big problem, and I think in Finland we have still the culture of taboo to talk about pornography in media. But as our minister told earlier, not today, but yesterday, I think he talked about that we are going to launch a campaign against sexual violence targeted at young people, making use of the social media. And young people have been preparing this campaign too, so we have engaged young people, a school class, to prepare this campaign so that it will shoot them and it will be a thing for them. So that's one thing we have done to prevent this, to have the young people in focus.
Next, Minister Arnholm.
Thank you very much, because to all of you, because I think this is a political discussion when it is at its best. We are discussing a true problem, and nobody has an answer. I think this is really the right way to go about this, because I really think it's a hard question, and it's good to hear all of you saying, I really don't know, but let's start talking about it. For me, it's also important to remember. When I was a kid, there was such a thing as pornography, and there has always been such a thing as hatred against women. Now these things have found a new channel. We must remember, before the internet, there was pornography, and Manu, I don't know if it was a slip of the tongue, but you also. We must remember we have a new channel. I think the channel really has in a progressive way just made the problems much larger, but we mustn't focus only on the channel, because I think when we fight the channel, we are always bound to lose. We have to do, and I really like what you say about different campaigns, because we must always strengthen the good part of each and everybody. I mean, there will always be pornography, and you watched it, I watched it, my son does. We really must be confident that we can meet that at the same time as we really discuss where can we draw the lines. I'm really representing a country that has abolished buying sex, so I'm not against legislation when I really can see it has something to really contribute. But when it comes to close down websites, and there will always be problems. And I think in Sweden we have legislation that will make it where a lot of things that you can see on the internet is forbidden. Sometimes it's not a question of legislation, but about the resources you put to find it and to really trace it down. I would only like to just add one more Nordic good example of what you can do when it comes to media, because it's not only the dusky corners of internet, it's also in all media. That is where masculinity in a bad way is monitored or is shown. I think the thought or idea of public service, of having a commonly financed media, as we have in many Nordic countries, with television that is in the public service, and that competes with other commercialized channels, and then provides better quality, less and less gender unequal stuff. I think that I'm really happy that we have clinged on to the public service, and I think the public service in the media has a lot to contribute in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Torkelsen would like to come in as well.
Thank you. It was just a thought, but we have done something in Norway when it comes to what was called child pornography. We don't call it that. It's not called child pornography in the laws or in the paragraphs. It's called display of child abuse, which it is. And just a question, but since you mentioned these forms of very violent pornography, one could think that one can do something of the same thing, that you don't call it pornography. This is actually display of rape, it's display of torture, it's display of violence. But then also we have to take this debate about pornography. What is it? Yeah, you know, because we haven't been willing to set different, or we're treating pornography as the same thing, you know, and that is a problem. It might be a problem, but I think that we might start by calling it something else. And also, we have this button that you can, or if someone is coming into the sites where there is a display of child abuse, then there is an automatic warning. You're just put onto the police automatically, so that and this site says, "Are you aware that you're actually now at the site where there is child abuse?" And you can think about those kinds of means to address this specific problem too, because of course there will always be different kinds of channels to those who want this pornography. But I mean, the internet is so massive; it's really massive, and they're exposed to this from very early age, and it's very damaging. So I think we should think about this. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I think we have to draw this meeting to a close because Ms. Bachelet is waiting for all the ministers. You are to be there at 3, and you have to get outside and brace the winds. Well, this has been truly stimulating. I think there's been no question that there is a great deal of unanimity on where to go on these issues. The discussion is now very much on how to get there. And I think this was a very stimulating discussion on methodologies and strategies, and it is to be continued, I'm sure, in other arenas. I apologize to the 2 persons who had asked for the floor, but things evolve, as you know, in meetings like this, and hopefully there will be an opportunity for the 2 persons to talk to either of the ministers directly. I thank you very much for coming, all of you. Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon.